they were exiled out. They became the coast over here. And many say they were buffeting the tribe of Dan amongst this coast, you can see along here. So they were in this region. But again, the Amorites were here first. Then they were cast out and pushed toward the coast through Judah. And then over here, Ammon then took over. So Ammon was to the side, then they came over here. So what you have is Ammon and Amorites aren't the same, like I mentioned before. I made that mistake. Ammon came from Lot's daughter, the Ammonites and the Moabites. But the Amorites came from, again, Noah's son Ham and his line.
It's like amoral, like Amorites.
Yeah, amoral. That's a good way to remember it. Amoral, the Amorites. Okay. So this is where that kind of falls in, but it kind of reminds me of the Arnon River issue, because I want you to see where he tells you about how he mentioned there was the flood. He mentioned the Red Sea and Arnon in the same similitude of flooding. And so that's where he's talking about here. But he mentions Amorites. And that throws people off because he was talking back to when days of Abram through Joshua. The Amorites were here, not Ammonites, but Amorites. Then they were cast out and they were pushed this way, according to Judges, by Judah and to the coastline. And then you have Ammonites now, well, not now, but after that time in that area, that region. So if you go back to another piece I want to show you from this aspect of it, I want to go and read also, I know. Let's read in Revelation chapter 12, that parlays with Daniel. A couple of things I want to tie in to what we just read, because I was so busy doing my little preaching thing, I forgot to read some things to you. So read verses 6 and 14 and 16 when he says, "And the woman fled into the desert, where she has a place prepared by God, that they may nourish her 1,260 days." Okay? So that's the second half of tribulation. So think about that. That's another evidence. Why do I want to highlight verse 6? Because no one factors in, that's validation that at day 1230 that the beast started chasing after them. Because if they're in the place of Petra for 1,260 days, that's the entire second half. That means they had to already make their trek there. Do you see? They had to start making their trek there before they got there. Okay, so they didn't get there. He didn't start pursuing them. They get there overnight. That's not for millions of people to go there, or try to have millions go there. Only 144,000 make it. Remember, he says winter, because it is in winter, February, March. That's not funny. It's the end of winter. If it's a long winter, not cool. It's on the Sabbath. There's a Purim celebration. And by the way, some women are pregnant in those days. It's not an overnight travel day. It's a couple of weeks to go down here. And so therefore, he's going to be traversing after them prior to Passover, but because they traveled a long distance and touched dead bodies, they can't worship on Passover in Nisan. They got to do it in Iyar. But again, Revelation 12:6 says, "The woman fled the desert where was a place prepared by God, that she may nourish her 1,260 days," which is the entire second half of tribulation, which means she had to be traversing already to get there prior, which validates what I'm telling you, that the beast is going after them for 30 days prior. That's how they got here. Okay? So you want to see why I'm pointing that verse out? That's why. Look at verse 14 and 16 of the same chapter in Revelation. In verse 14, "And there were given to the woman the two wings of a great eagle, that she might fly in the desert into her place, and she should be nourished there a season and a season and a half a season from the face of the serpent." Now watch this now. "And the serpent cast out of his mouth after the woman water as a river, that he might cause her to be carried away by the stream." And there's your evidence again, going back to Isaiah 16, going back to the Arnon mentioned over in Numbers 12, and now again Revelation. There's this similitude of Arnon River and then a flood, and Daniel 9 is over flooding. He's going to he can't go over here, so he uses the sea. He just tries to get them to flood it, to kill them, to drown them. By the way, what a coincidence. Do you think he remembers how his emissaries against Israel and the Egyptians were drowned in the Red Sea? He doesn't forget that, does he? He's not forgetting that. He's like, okay, just about fair play, my friends. He's going to take the Arnon, try to drown them. And he does kill a ton of them. Because the Arnon River, by the way, is quite a deep chasm. It's over 1,000 feet down. So it's a cavern. It's a chasm. You have to like traverse down. If you're on the descent down and that flood comes, you're done. You're done. And if you're on the way up, you better be higher up to get out of that crevice, because he's got you. He's got you. So that's where the Dead Sea issue and how it feeds from the Arnon, feeds into the Arnon. He's going to flood that in there. You say, where do you get the water from? The Dead Sea is right there, man. The tributary off the Dead Sea. So that's how that works. So I want you to see that. Then I wanted you to also see a couple of things I wanted to point out to you. I told you about Psalm 90. Let me see where else. I told you about Judges. Let me see. Let's go to Lamentations in chapter 116. Lamentations. Lamentations chapter 116. He says, For these things I weep, mine eye runs down with water, because the Comforter that shall restore my soul is far from me. My children are desolate, because the enemy prevailed mightily. So, and he says in verse 17, Zion spread forth her hands, and there is none to comfort her. The Lord has commanded concerning Jacob that his adversaries should round about him, and Jerusalem is a menstruous woman. Meaning there's a lot of bloodshed around Jerusalem. And here he's talking about the enemy who prevailed mightily. So I contest to you that Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 16 and 17 of Lamentations is reciting not only the times of the captivity of the bloodshed, but he's talking about the future antitype of the bloodshed of the beast himself coming against Israel when they try to make their place to Petra. I wanted to point that out to you. Then also, you can go over to, let me see where else I'm looking at here. Let me see what else I wanted to point out. I had a couple of notes I wanted to make sure I covered with you. Did I cover them all? Yeah, I think I covered. Oh, yep. Yep. Okay, so let me make sure I covered it all. I did. So I just wanted to make sure that I covered all the different verses that show that. I got to write this on the board later, but the reality is that there is a context in Daniel chapter 9 to surmise this, that he's talking about the time frame of which the 7 weeks, again, takes place from 586 BC in time and is culminated in 538 BC, which is a part of when they're in the 70 years of captivity, but they haven't completed it yet. But the 7 weeks was completed before the 70 years was completed. And the 380 years land didn't lay fallow, which means they have to have 167 years of payment for that, which is 160 on the Julian timeline. That is still being completed while the 7 weeks has already been done. Okay? So Daniel's talking about the 70 weeks, the 7 weeks, and year 538 when he wrote chapter 9 taking place during 538 when this is being completed. Jeremiah and Ezekiel, again, didn't see that. He did. The 62 weeks, interesting enough, does not have anything to do with these. It takes place at 445 BC at the end of the years of the land being laid fallow. It starts where that one ends and then continues to 18 BC. So interesting enough, again, Daniel sees the 7 weeks and 62 weeks in two different time frames. The 7 weeks was fulfilled during his life. He writes about 7 weeks at the time when it's being fulfilled. During the 70 years in captivity, still being fulfilled, yet to be completed. During the time the land's being laid fallow, still to be yet completed, 445. And yet, then the 62 week takes place after the land laying laid fallow, when that land is finally being completed for its justice in 445 BC. That's when 62 weeks takes over and then begins the count on that. And then we saw within that, the tribulation has two passing points, and each one has two break points in each one. The first 1,260 days is earmarked by 1230 and 30, and the last 1260 days is earmarked by a 110 and 1150. And so, and how do I know that? Because the 110 I got just from subtracting what Daniel tells us in chapter 8, verse 14. There's 2,300 days until the sanctuary is cleansed. You just count backwards, and therefore you have 110 days left of the second half, and therefore that's what's left over. And so, and that's on your chart as well I gave you concerning the future prophetic timeline, kind of covers these things in months and events as well. So I hope that answers some questions and kind of redefines if Daniel 9 needs to be looked upon. And so from here, I'm going to write some more things on the board, but I'm at a stopping point. I'm done. So if any questions you have, any concerns, or just clarity I need to be adding, let me know. But I just find it fascinating to finally, in my mind and in my heart and in my spirit, I have total clarity on this stuff to me, hopefully to you, and I'm going to write it out more so. The chart I did before which was on Daniel 8, to your Q&A question Nancy Harbor asked, that question. I'm going to have that chart along with this. I have to have these, this is too important just to like say it and not, immortalize it. The Noah's flood and the Exodus issue and the Kings, I changed that on the world history chart. I got to do another chart with this. I got to do a chart that combines Daniel 8:14 and Daniel 9 in the events, because these things can be easily forgotten, easily misunderstood, and then reconvoluted back into the churchanity's view of how they work out. So I'm going to be on my work to do that. That's what I'm going to do to present that to you. And we'll go over that at our conference coming up in October. We'll go over that process with you and other things as well as we did a review, but I got to give you that chart. So what other questions do you have or concerns? Did I leave anything out that may be a hanging chad in your mind?
I was looking at the cross. The number that speaks to me from the cross is 4. It divides the wall into 4 sections, like the 4 sets of people that will have reference.
Oh, the cross, the 4 points. I see what you're saying.
The 4 quadrants.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. Yeah, that's pretty interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had to teach that stuff all along. Every time you have to plot something in a plane.
Yeah, but it's funny. It's funny. You thought 4 quadrants. I was thinking 4 points because you got top to bottom. That's right. I was thinking the points. You're thinking of the quadrants itself. I got you. I know what you're saying. Yeah. Either way, it's 4. Whether you're counting the points or the quadrant, it's still 4. Which is interesting. If you count both, then it's 8, and 8 is resurrection, new life, new beginning. So I'm going to write some more things, like I say, down here. But I want to make sure I'm clear if anything that you guys need clarity on. If I talk fast, which not if, because I talk fast at certain areas, because of the excitement and just the whole thing about this, it's very fascinating. I'm going to also bring to you later some other things that I mentioned. That one Isaiah passage, I'm going to find that. I didn't have it memorized. I'll get that back to you as well. But again, we'll just close in prayer. Anything you have that you want to add later on, you can. So let's close. So Father, we thank you for this time we have today. Thank you for the opportunity we have to be gathered with you, to be learning from you and your word, and just to have insight to what you have done, what you are doing, and yet you will do on this earth. Thank you for sparing us, for promising things to us, and to yet also challenge us to be edified, to know that there are times of trouble and great terror coming on this earth. And for those that will not, for the majority, either in testament or of covenant, have to endure all this. Give them strength, give them the peace. Give us all the sense of understanding that you are God and you do sustain and provide, and everything is for a purpose and for an end that glorifies you. On every part we play and every part we're used in that, we thank you for it. And we just thank you for all you have done and continue to do and yet will do on this earth, and to the coronation of you, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. We ask all this in Jesus, Yeshua's name. Amen.
I was thinking about that passage. It says,
What's that?
He who does